my urban team that, can you give me a list of all the slums in Dhaka? They said, oh, we don't have it. So I said, who has it? Nobody has it. Then I called up Dhaka North City Corporation. They didn't have it. I then asked that, do we know that what are the NGOs working in which slums? And I sent somebody over to NGO Affairs Group. Did they have it? We're like, no, we don't keep track of which. We just know that they work in some slums, but we don't know which slums. So the biggest challenge of coordination is that lack of information and lack of data. We don't know who's doing what. We often complain about government's lack of coordination, but even in the NGO sector, there is absolutely no coordination, right? So I think, in a sense, what we are talking about in the climate space, can we afford this? We can. And I think the biggest part of this is this coordination mechanism, which is, of course, first thing is bringing the whole of government approach that our Honorable Envoy is very keen to do, and they have already started that process in kind of climate adaptation. But we also need to take it one step forward. So beyond whole of government, we need to take it the whole of Bangladesh approach. So bring not just the government, but at the same time, the private sector and the social sector in this process. Because there are certain things the government cannot do. There are certain things that the private sector cannot do. There are certain things that social sector cannot do. So we all have our collective strengths, and we all need to come together. But for that to happen, we need to coordinate in terms of what we are going to do, how we are going to do it, and how we are going to finance it. So I think, in a sense, this one quick example in the recent part that I know, when we talked about private sector coming together. So as you know, that one of the biggest challenges in the environment is the plastic challenge. And when we started talking about it, we thought that first we need to approach the biggest plastic producer to see that what they are thinking about these problems. So I convened all the CEOs of the biggest plastic producers in Bangladesh, so together with Unilever. So we had a few dinners and just talked about the plastic challenge. And I was so pleasantly surprised that all of these CEOs are personally very committed to do something about it, but they just didn't have the partner to do it. They were not talking to each other. They didn't have the facilitator to kind of bring them together. So after talking, so we found a lot of these commonality and figured out that how we can complement the larger ecosystem together. So together, Honorable Envoy was there. We launched the Bangladesh Sustainability Alliance, and where all the CEOs personally committed themselves to work on this plastic challenge. And here are the biggest plastic producers, and it's not plastic greenwashing. They're really, really committed. So essentially, I think the reason I'm giving these examples are that we first need to talk to each other, understand each other's incentives, and then, because the climate crisis is so big, that this is something that none of us alone can do this together. And then last point I want to make is that if you want to attract private sector financing, I think that they all look for, risk and reward, right? So I think BRAC is a unique organization where we use market for development, and we look at where private sector doesn't see value or not enough profit to be made. That's where we come in. I'll just give you one example. Microfinance. Microfinance is a sector where traditional banks, i.e. private sector, actually didn't think that there is high risk and there is not enough money to be made. This year alone, in microfinance, BRAC, just one of the many microfinance institutions, we disbursed $7 billion in this sector. It's entirely informal sector. And with a non-performing loan NPL rate of less than 2%. So this is a group that traditionally banks thought they were risky. So, and now look at the formal banking sector, look at their non-performing loan performance, and you tell me which group is more risky, right? So I think essentially this is the fundamentally different way of looking at risk. And Bangladesh is a fantastic example. We talked about disaster risk management, but there are many examples where Bangladesh actually looked at its people as its biggest asset and invested in them, and it paid off really handsomely. And I think, in the climate adaptation space, there are plenty of opportunities, not just from we shouldn't, as our envoy said, the Muji Prosperity Plan, and our late Dr. Salimullah used to say that we should not look at it only from a vulnerability perspective. We should look at it from an opportunity perspective, how we can also thrive. Every crisis has an opportunity angle to this as well. So I think, in a sense, if we look at risk differently, and I think the whole idea behind it is that we need to understand this biggest majority population, which are not part of the formal sector. And I think that's where we have a huge strength. We have organizations who actually have penetrated on the grassroots level. We understand this sector. So how can we work collectively together? And I see that it's a great example that this My Home, My Shelter, that two-story house that you see, this is the Ministry of Environment and BRAC work very closely together to come up with a model where your own home can be actually used as a shelter. And the idea behind it is that you design it in a way that is very human-centered. You see it's two stories. The bottom story, the ground floor, is actually for livestock and your cattle. You know that in Bangladesh, one of the biggest reasons why people don't want to go to the shelters is because they don't want to use their livestock as their asset. So this is the model that was created, that you actually bring in your 5 families around you and their livestock assets, and you can park them in downstairs, and you can have them upstairs as well. And it's built in such a way. So it's a great model, but this is something that we cannot scale. This is where we need government, the private sector to come in and create a financing mechanism where the model has been built and people themselves can build this in a different way. So I think there are great examples, and this is a great start. So I congratulate the government and ADB for doing this and bringing us all together under one shelter. Thank you very much.